Welcome back to Real Roots Radio. I am so excited to welcome the reigning IBMA Guitar Picker of the Year, Trey Hensley, to Real Roots Radio today. How you doing, Trey?
I'm doing great, man. How are you doing?
Doing well, doing well. One of my favorite guitar pickers for quite some time. What's it mean to be recognized again by the International Bluegrass Music Association for your guitar prowess?
Well, thank you very much, man. I mean, it's pretty unbelievable. It's just, even to be just on any list ever with the people that are on the list is amazing. And that's meant so much. I think it's been several years now where I've made the five, folks at the end, and that's just unbelievable to me. And to be, awarded it's still, I mean, it's been a couple weeks since the award show, and I still haven't been able to fully, vocalize how much it means to me. It's so cool. I used to go to IBMA when I was a kid, and I mean, I've been going there for as long as I've been into music, and never thought I would ever win anything like that. And so it's been way, way cool. So I appreciate everybody at IBMA and all the voters and stuff. It's awesome.
Bluegrass is such a community, but it really seems like right now this current crop of hot rod guitar pickers in bluegrass are a tight knit community as well. You and folks like Jake Workman and Billy Strings and so many more. Seems like you're always running into one another and lifting each other up and picking, which is really cool. I mean, you see that with other instruments as well, but it really seems that this current generation of bluegrass guitarists, of which you are a part of, seem really tight. Is that a correct assumption?
It definitely seems that way to me. I mean, it feels like we're all buds, and it's honestly, I would have been excited. I'm very honored to have won and excited about it, but I would have been excited for whoever's name was called. It's like I love all four of them are good friends. They're all, some of my favorite guitar players. And, like Molly, I just recorded a song on my new record, and Molly's playing and singing on it. So we pick, and all of us, it's like I don't get to see Billy that often, but when I do, it's we're buds, and I love his playing, and love getting to pick with him, and of course Brian and Cody, and and yeah, and you mentioned Jake. It's like we every time we ever get to hang out, it's just, pals, and there's never any sort of feeling of competition between any of us. I don't, from my perspective, just it's all inspiration. It's like I love their playing, and it's just to be in this community is cool.
It's been amazing how in such a short time, I guess the first time I saw you was probably at one of the first World of Bluegrasses in Raleigh, North Carolina. You got up on stage as a special guest with Blue Highway
Oh
because
yeah,
you had sang on The Game, which is still one of my favorite bluegrass records ever. And
yeah, that's a great one.
you were a guest of Blue Highway on that album with a really cool song, and it kind of ended up blossoming into a great musical partnership with Rob Ikes over the years. But the way that you draw influence from everybody from Blue Highway to great blues giants as well into your new unique blend of music, of course, with plenty of country flair in there as well, puts you in a unique position in American roots music these days. Why do you think it's important to draw influence from so many different genres?
I mean, I feel like bluegrass always has. Like if you go back to Bill, it was, a combination of blues and combination of country and jazz. And, I always feel like you hear that, like you listen to early Charlie Parker stuff, and it's very reminiscent of early Bill Monroe stuff. Or if it's like I feel like everybody was sort of drinking from the same wells. And there's a great story about Charlie Parker. How after shows he would just go to this bar and lay down and listen to country music on the jukebox, and that's something. And it's just I feel like everybody, especially in like these organic music scenes like early jazz stuff and bluegrass and it is so organic. I mean, that's what we're just sort of drawing from this gigantic well of music. And I always feel like my favorite musicians had big ears, like the Tony Rice was listening to all this different stuff, and well, one of the first concerts I ever went to was a Tony show, and he kicked it off with Big Country, and then my favorite things, and I remember specifically him
That's
talking
both
about,
ends right there.
yeah, it's like he said, that first song was Jimmy Martin's song, and the second one was by John Coltrane. And it was like, oh, who is John? I just assumed John Coltrane was some like, guitar player I never heard of, and, and then you listen to it, it's like, wow, Tony was really, you do hear the similarities of what he was doing. And, I've always been really into country, and I've always had like a lower register voice. And so it's tended to, be more of that country sad song thing. And that's what I love. And I love bluegrass and blues and country and jazz and all this stuff. And I'm always listening to music, and I feel like if you're listening with intention, it just comes out in your own music, whether you are consciously thinking about it or not.
Chatting with Trey Hensley here on Real Roots Radio. Of course, for the last, I guess, decade plus, you and Rob Ickes have been just a remarkable American Roots duo, tackling all sorts of genres and just taking no prisoners. But with you guys being in different generations on the Roots music scene and kind of in different places in life, you've kind of hit a bit of a crossroads. How did the decision and the conversations take place for your collaboration with Rob Ickes to take a hiatus as you kind of look to ramp things up with your solo career?
I think this record was the big moment. I've been wanting to do it for several years now. I kind of had plans when COVID hit to start working on my solo record, and then we tour a bunch. Like we kind of have consistently done 100 shows a year or more, since 2014. And with that, and working on other stuff, with like we've done several records, and it's hard to find time to do anything. And then it
and you
seemed
guys
like,
are on other people's records too,
yeah,
like these great blues records. You guys are on that Judd's album with Molly. I mean, you guys have just been everywhere.
we've done a lot, and we did a record with Taj. We did a whole run of shows with him a couple years ago, and of course Rob plays on a million records. He's all the time doing studio stuff. And so he's busy, I'm busy. And it just felt like we talked about it. It's honestly been in the talks for several years now. We've talked about, okay, well, next year's the year we'll slow down. And then we would book stuff. It's like, okay, well, let's kick it to the next year. And then I guess last fall was the first kind of discussion of it. And it was like, okay, we need to figure out a time to where we can kind of, and it's not, definitely that's the hiatus part of it was the best way to put it, because we are, we're doing a handful of shows next year, and we'll do, things that come in. But for the most part, since I've got my record and I'm putting together a band, it'll be that, and I've wanted to do, another thing was I play electric guitar some, and so I wanted to do, a country record, and I'm halfway done with that. And so it's kind of like, it's been busy. It's been a lot of work, even among, because we're still touring. We're finishing out this fall as a duo, and it's been a busy summer, busy fall, and then finished a record, worked on half another record. So it's been kind of hectic and chaotic, but it's a good thing. It's like I love being busy, and I love, if you're creating and making music, it's a good place to be. So it's been a lot, but and the thing with Rob's been just so great, 10 years plus at this point, and he's such a great person and musician, obviously, and we're kind of it's very open ended, because I'm sure we'll be playing together more, and there's a good chance that he'll be on some of these solo quote unquote shows that I do, sneak him in.
Trey, you have a new album on the way from Pine Castle Records.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell us about it and why it sounds like it's been a long time coming.
It has been, and I've written a lot of these songs. I've had them for years. And it's funny because I have, I wrote a bunch of them around the time we were doing that Living in a Song album. And I saved quite a few of them because they didn't fit that album. And they honestly didn't fit the duo as much as they would fit what I was wanting to do. And so, and then I had an equal amount of songs for this kind of country record that I'm doing. And so it was really like a narrowing down process of what do I want to do. And then it's funny because once I got in the studio, I wrote like 3 other songs that we ended up using on the album. And It's very like I'm working with Brent Mayer on this record, and he did mine and Rob's last two albums, and I love working with him because it is so organic. Like I don't think we did more than two takes of any song, and like all of my guitar and vocals are live. I didn't overdub anything. Like Stuart Duncan played on half the record, Andy Leftwich played on the other half, and he would track play either of those guys would track playing mandolin, and then go back over and overdub fiddle. Other than that, and the harmony vocals, everything was live, and I love working with Brent because I mean he's done everything from he did Elvis's last hit Way Down, and he's did all the Judd stuff and worked with Merle Haggard and um, lots of people that I love and respect but he just loves going in and doing stuff live, and that's the way I like to do it. And then I was approached by a couple different record labels and had great talks with Ethan and the folks at Pine Castle, and they just felt like a great fit. And I mean, I'm really excited about this record. The first song came out recently, and it's just been exciting. I've been really excited about this new chapter.
With your diverse musical interests, it's got to be exciting to be working with a kindred spirit like Brent behind the producer chair, because he's worked with so many different types of artists. That's got to be really fun and enriching for you being in the studio.
Oh, for sure. And it's a good, like, he's as much as he's into all this different stuff and he's worked, with everybody, he has a good ear for songs that go together. And that's where I feel like, if I have 50 songs, it's hard for me to figure out which 10 or 11 or 12 go on an album. And I know me and Rob, like, we produced our first couple of albums, and I love them. I loved working on them, but they are a little bit like that. Like we'll just throw stuff at it, and then so it was nice when we started working with Brent because he could be like, okay, well, I think these 10 songs really go together. I think these make a nice cohesive album. And that I really needed that on this record because I had just a surplus of songs. And it's funny because we ended up doing like Up on Cripple Creek, the band song, and it was obviously I didn't write, but it was just a jam in the studio, and it ended up we got a cool take of it and left it on there. And so I love having somebody that isn't me that can kind of make these decisions and help with these things. And yeah, he's been. I mean, you come back into the studio and he tells you about working on the first Sly and the Family Stone album, or tracking Louis Armstrong. It's like, oh wow, it's really cool. The stories are worth being there for.
That's fun too, that he has the concept of the album in mind, because it seems like a lot of artists or producers or record labels, it seems like a lot of folks are so single driven these days with the way that the algorithm and that the DSPs, kind of are leaning into that it seems like for a lot of folks, the art of the album as a unit has gotten lost. And I don't know, you're probably like me that grew up listening to albums start to finish, whether on CD or on vinyl or digital or whatever. And so to see someone that takes that care into making sure they all fit together cohesively has got to be a lot of fun.
It is, and I think that I love it because Brent is, he's from the generation of the album, and I don't even want to go down the road of talking him into, well, it doesn't have to be, they can be whatever. Because I love that, I love that there's a care and I mean, yeah, like you said, there's an art to it, and it's I always think of records like that Tom Petty Wildflower album, because it was going to be a double album and they had to narrow it down to one, and it's just a lot of the bluegrass album band stuff, there's a million records you can name that's like, okay, well, these
Double
are
044 to Blonde on Blonde. They wouldn't be the same if they didn't have that kind of scope in mind,
Exactly. Yeah, I mean that's a great, it's like you go to 0044 and put it on shuffle and it hits great. It's a great record, but if you listen to it top to bottom, that's the way that they wanted it to be heard. And I still listen to records like that. I mean, I know there's the singles that come out, like mine just came out, but when the record comes out, it's an experience, and you can I feel like it's a different experience if the care is not there, and you can pick up on that. Like if you are like us that have been listening to music intently for decades, it's you pick up on these things, and so to work with somebody that has several decades on me, that way more experience than I do with it, it's really cool. And I just sort of leave it to him. It's like I have say, but so far I've never had a thing where it's been like, well, I'm hearing it this way. It's been all 100% like, okay, yeah, you're right. That's the way it's supposed to be.
Trey Hensley here on Real Roots Radio. Before I ask about the new single, I gotta point out that you've got what, at least a dozen guitars on display back there, right? Have
It's
you a
all
couple?
AI, man.
That one looks like it has like a Larry Sparks style pick guard on it.
It
What's
does,
what's
yeah.
the story behind that one?
So I've got it here, but the guy that I took lessons off of when I was a kid, his name is GC Matlock. He's an incredible guitar player. He passed away this year, but he played on. He had a band called Hard Times, and they did a couple of albums in the '70s, and they're really hard to find, but they're two incredible albums. But he played a D35 from 1969 that he bought in a music store that had that pick guard on it, and it was like the era of what are those guitars? Grammar guitars, like the Porter Wagner played on the Porter Wagner show. That's basically that pick guard. And Martin had done it from the factory. The guitar that's a copy of, my guitar teacher's guitar, had all this custom inlay stuff. Like it had the Martin flower pot inlay on the headstock, like a D45 would, and it was just an atypical D35 guitar, and it had that gigantic pickguard on it. And I just always loved that. I mean, I grew up watching the Porter Wagner show and all these old country, hee haw from the 60s and 70s, where, every country singer would come out there and they had either a double pick guard, the Everly Brothers, all that stuff, where the pick guard was at least 70% of the guitar. And I'm a sucker for that. I know a lot of people will argue it kills the vibration of the top, and I'm sure it probably does, but I don't really care.
It
I
just
don't
looks
care.
so dang
It
cool,
looks
right?
cool. Go tell that to Larry Sparks.
Yeah.
Larry gets the best tone ever.
Yeah.
And
Go tell him he could get better tone if he didn't have that pick
that's
guard.
right.
See how that goes for you, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Let me record it, but go tell him that. Yeah, and I always think that, it's like Larry gets such a beautiful tone on record and in person, and that guitar looks like Larry Sparks. And I always think that guitar, that the one I've got back here, that's a copy of. It just is, it's GC, like I look at it and I think that immediately brings me to mind of him, so I love that guitar. And that one, I just got that guitar back. It was in the Bluegrass Hall of Fame for, I guess, 2 or 3 years. Rob and I did those separate, but we did the PBS, my bluegrass story,
Yeah.
and so they had an exhibit on that for a couple years, and that guitar was up in Owensboro for a while. So I'm glad to get it back. I just got it back about a month ago.
For any young guitar pickers out there, what advice would you tell them to stay away from collecting guitars?
Oh, I'm not the one to ask. It's funny because I am to the point now where it's like I see other people. I always think of Tony, and he had, Clarence's guitar, and there's certain people, even from rock music, and like Neil Young has the Black Les Paul, and Willie Nelson and Trigger.
Willie's got Trigger.
Yeah, it's like, and there's people that have one guitar, and I'm kind of getting to that point now where like I like one guitar for touring with. And I get a certain, and especially now that I'm running in-ear monitors and stuff, like you get accustomed to a certain guitar, and but it's hard for me. I just love guitars, and so I'm a bad person to ask. However, you really do only need one. One good one will do you. Think about making music more than the gear.
I guess it goes to your diverse taste in music, probably a diverse taste in guitars, and it's got to be helpful, particularly if you're going for more of a bluegrass sound, more of a country sound, more of a jazz sound, more of a blues sound. To have more tools at your disposal for the sound you're going for, that's got to be kind of fun too.
That's it. That's a big portion of it, because I've got some guitars, like I've got, this old 60s Hummingbird that really doesn't sound that great. Like it's not that good of a guitar. Like for if I was to take it out to a bluegrass jam, it would get totally destroyed. Just the first banjo break would just that guitar would fly to splinters. But for this, for if I want to cut a country thing that's just real strummy, I've got a guitar for that, and I love it, because I've Brian Sutton has actually been producing my country record, and of course he's got as many or more guitars than I have, and probably a cooler bunch of them, and to even just talk to him because he plays on all kinds of things, and for the most part you could get sound out of any guitar, but it's nice to have tools in the toolbox to have different sounds, and they all do sound different. You could get 12 Gibson J200s and they're all going to sound different, or you could get 12 D18s or Taylors or whatever, they're all going to sound a little bit different, and they all are voiced for certain things, so it's nice to have options.
Trey Hensley's new solo album is coming out soon on Pinecastle Records. The debut single just recently released. Why don't you tell us about this new song?
All right, so I wrote this song, I guess back in 2021 with my buddy Bobby Starnes. So I lived in Nashville for a long time, and then me and my wife moved out to East Tennessee. We're both originally from there. And when I first moved back, me and Bobby would get together pretty often and write. And I think this was the first song we wrote after I moved back. And I've always loved this song, and I've kind of had it in my back pocket for my solo record, and I've done it a handful of times live, and it's always like a good vehicle for sort of jamming. Like I just played it on the Opry Saturday night, and it turns into
just
this,
sliding that in there, right?
Oh yeah, just real quick,
Yeah.
But it does turn into this little 6 or 7 minute jam unintentionally. It's like I played it at out in Brevard with Travis Book, and somebody recorded it, and it was like 10 minutes or 11 minutes. Like it can get into jammy world, which is fun, but the song itself I've always really liked, and I just it was one of those things where it's like, okay, well I know this one's going to be on the record, and I think it's the first song we cut for it, so I'm excited about it. It's obviously the first song that's coming out, and will most likely be the title track of the album, which is very cool.
The new single is called "Can't Outrun the Blues," and why does it serve as a great showcase of what's to come with the new album? You said it's going to serve as the title track. So with your new solo career and journey on which you're embarking, why is it a great showpiece for that?
I think it's a good culmination of all the things that I do and that I kind of am musically. It's got the blues aspect, obviously. It's got very much a bluegrass. I always hear it as a, kind of a Del McCurry-esque thing. And then it's got the sort of country backbeat thing happening, wailing. To me, it's like it's definitely a combination of those big three genres that I'm most inspired by. And so I feel like if I was going to show somebody one song and be like, okay, well, this is kind of what I do, that was it. And, it's funny because I recorded a country version of it. We've done like several different versions of it. And then this one was the one that I think it was the first one we did, where it's just, we sat down and jammed on it, and this is what came out. And it to me, it does like sum up pretty much my musical existence at this point in my life and career, which is pretty cool to have a song that can do that, obviously not from an autobiographical standpoint. I never write from that world. It's always, I always loved Tom T. Hall that could write sort of character songs or songs from the perspective of somebody else. And but this one, yeah, it's I think it's a good combination of all three things, while largely the bluegrass thing is the most present and the most prevalent, which is the same for me. I mean, my bluegrass background runs the deepest of all of them, and so that's obviously what I'm geared towards.
It's a killer cut. It's available now from Pine Castle Records. Where can folks go, Trey, to keep up to date with your solo dates and to stay tuned and in the loop with all this new music that's going to be coming their way in the coming weeks and months?
Yeah, so obviously I'm on all the social media things, at Trey A. Hensley, I think on all of them. And then my website is treyhensley.com. The tour dates for next year will be out pretty soon. Most likely later on this fall, we're going to drop a bunch of tour dates. And then, yeah, the record comes out in the spring, and we'll have a pre-order for that pretty soon. It'll be on vinyl and CD and have all that good stuff up on the website. But yeah, treyhensley.com will get you there.
Fantastic. Trey with an E, Trey.
That's right, Trey, yeah.
TreyHensley.com to stay tuned. Trey, thanks so much for joining us on Real Roots Radio, and thanks for putting out great music.
Hey, thank you, Daniel.